ISIS. Even the name makes people cringe, which is why we're going to talk about it. With effects reaching all over the world, this problem is centered in the Middle East. The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS for short, is probably one of the most formidable threats facing the Middle East and the world at large today. It's a scary topic, but in order to understand ISIS and to come up with solutions, we have to understand what exactly it is. Moreover, we have to understand where ISIS comes from, why it's here, and what we're trying to do about it. Although it's renowned as a terrorist organization, the Islamic State has fundamental and pretty obvious ties to a warped version of Islam that developed from several centuries' worth of misinterpretations of the Quran. Of course, with these misinterpretations come the warped social normalities of the Middle East as we know it today, and is often the cause of much of the violence that takes place throughout the countries involved. As a whole, the Islamic State both confirms and redefines what we know to be religious extremism today. In a way, it's exactly what we would expect, but ISIS also pushes the limits of how far extremism can go. But first, we need to ask ourselves, what is religious extremism? Extremism has existed for centuries. It exists in nearly every religion or belief system throughout the world. Religious extremists, or radicals, are people who take the idea of God and use it to back their own violent agendas, with the fundamental belief that their views are inherently the truth and everyone else is inherently wrong. Of course, Islam is no exception. Islamic extremism has a direct link to a conflict within their central belief system that has existed for almost as long as their religion itself. The two groups of Islam, known as the Sunnis and the Shias, formed after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. The rift between them stems from who they believe is the rightful heir to Muhammad, his advisor Abu Bakr or his son-in-law Ali. Over time, this dispute grew in size and intensity, and both branches developed their own systems that differed in beliefs, dogmas, and worships. As the conflict grew, the Middle East became unstable over time, often bordering on violence. Religious extremism grew into a much more imminent threat as misunderstandings of the Quran became widespread and in some places commonly accepted. Groups of religious radicals with similar beliefs eventually joined together to spread their own warped interpretations of Islam throughout the community. And of course, one of these radical groups was the fast-growing and merciless organization known as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. With roots rumored to trace back to a United States military prison known as Camp Bucca in Iraq, where several future ISIS leaders were at one point inmates, the Islamic State began as a subordinate group of al-Qaeda, but quickly grew in size and brutality after the acquisition of weapons left behind by the United States forces in Iraq after the Gulf War. Due to the present conflict in Syria, the Islamic State was able to gain a solid foothold in the nation's foundation and became a full-fledged terrorist organization in an incredibly short amount of time. ISIS, due to its massive size and brutality, eventually broke away from al-Qaeda entirely, and by doing so demolishing their alliance. Since the separation, ISIS has been able to acquire an unbelievably large amount of land, along with Syria's massive oil fields. Currently, the extremist group is planning to initiate a mass ethnic cleansing of anyone who does not follow their radically warped interpretation of the Quran, which spells out bad news for most citizens and foreigners in the Middle East. With support from radicals in various countries all over the Middle East, including Egypt, Libya, Pakistan, Israel, Lebanon, the Philippines, Algeria, Jordan, Turkey, and Indonesia, ISIS has made it abundantly clear that it has the potential to become an unsolvable problem that could lead to the destabilization and complete collapse of many Middle Eastern governments and at worst lead to mass international warfare. ISIS is on a road to becoming the complete and utter moral undoing of society in the Middle East, causing over 2 million people to flee their homes and evacuate their home country in an effort to escape the swelling violence that surrounds them. Guilty of random beheadings, bombings, amputations, and crucifixions of minority groups, law enforcement, non-believers, and civilians, along with the capture, intended rape, and forced marriage of over 1,000 Yazidi women, the brainwashing of children, along with countless other crimes against humanity, the Islamic State has successfully managed to strike fear within the hearts and minds of people all over the world. Because of this fear plaguing many communities throughout the world, misconceptions and stereotypes form stating that all Islamic people are affiliated with radical groups, which ultimately alters the way many people think of Muslims on a basic level. Of course, these misconceptions have absolutely no basis in fact or hold any semblance of truth whatsoever. as Islam comes from the same theological ideology as Christianity and Judaism and is fundamentally a peaceful religion. It's no secret that modern day extremists choose guiding passages from the Quran in order to justify their cruel and inhuman actions all over the world, while simultaneously ignoring the vast majority of the Quran, which clearly states to make peace and avoid violence as much as possible. War and violence in Islamic traditions is extremely condemnable, and Muslims are absolutely not allowed to begin the cycle of violence, only acts of retaliation as a means of defense. Which means, of course, that Islam and ISIS are completely separate entities. To call an ISIS militant a true Muslim is like calling a Westboro Baptist a true Christian. It doesn't line up. They're completely different and on some level are in no way affiliated with each other at all. With so much violence and hostility surrounding the issue, it can be difficult to see potential solutions to the problem at hand. Currently, the rest of the world is ready to work together to counteract this problem as one international community, which means overcoming previously unbreachable barriers and forming alliances that could possibly bring the world together. Nonprofit organizations and human rights activists all over the world are working overtime to save the most amount of people possible, some going to the heart of the conflict in Mosul, Iraq, in order to make some kind of difference, such as the Iraqi Red Crescent. Education, activism, cooperation, and an overall desire to help the Middle East, whether it directly affects our daily lives or not, is what it's going to take to make any kind of difference. As Americans, if we want to live up to our self-proclaimed title of being world leaders, then we're going to have to take our heads out of the sand and work to fix this conflict on a large scale. In conclusion, the Islamic State is a massive problem that's going to take all of us to counteract on an international level. That we know of, there is no foolproof, end-all solution to this issue, but we do know that these next steps are critical in the cultural survival of the Middle East, and it's critical that we treat them as such, because at the end of the day, we need to be worried about how many people we have the ability to save, and not the people that we have the ability to kill. Ultimately, if violence is a solution to bringing down the Islamic State, then it should be done with an acute awareness of just how many people are being affected, with a particular precaution taken to civilian lives. We can't just go in and drop a bunch of bombs and hope for the best. It's going to take a massive amount of brain power through international collaboration to come up with a tactful and well thought out course of action. But hopefully, some kind of peace can be achieved, because at this point all we can do is educate ourselves, and others, about the problem, in hopes to spread awareness about the origins of ISIS, their reasons, their motives, and their plans. This isn't to invoke a sense of fear within us, but it's an effort to remain informed about the problem and adequately come up with effective and inventive solutions in the future.